everybody? Tyrone TG3 here. Pokemon Horizons, episode 12. The Future I Choose. This episode had a lot of lore, and I do want to apologize. This is definitely a late review. The only reason that is for a couple of things, actually. I've been working a lot on the Twitch side because I'm almost at 950 followers on the Twitch side, so I'm working in the background just to help push towards that 1K on Twitch. So if you haven't already, make sure you follow the Twitch channel for some fun. And just on top of that, I've also noticed that this episode was very dialogue heavy. So I wanted to make sure that I watched it a palpable number of times before I actually gave the review. I wanted to give you guys a full context of what was going on and how that episode is laid out, because this episode definitely focused a lot more on the lore and the overarching story factor here. And it seems from this episode we finally have an actual ready to go plot this time around. Not to say that Horizons hasn't had one. The overarching layered plot has been Liko wants to learn more about herself and more about Pokemon. Roy wants to be an ancient traveler, which is the trainers that catch a lot of Pokemon, rare legendary Pokemon, as well as find different treasures and different locales. And then they're all on the Rising Voltaclers, who pretty much has the exact same job where they travel around the world in search of Pokemon missions and things like that. So there has been a plot that I would say would be a overarching surface level plot, something to give all the characters actively something to do in their leisure. But now it looks like we're finally digging deep down into those direct character plots. We can see here that after the Arboliva situation from the last episode, Arboliva has an ancient Pokeball that reacts to Liko's pendant, and Tarapago's pre-evolved form comes out of it and basically shows Liko and Roy the ancient Pokemon trainer. I'll just dub him the ancient trainer for now, who was basically in charge of having 6 Pokemon that were all ancient Pokemon from back in the day, and those 6 ancient Pokemon came together and traveled with him across the world. Now, each of those Pokemon are sealed up inside an ancient Pokeball. Black Rayquaza was one of them. Arboliva obviously is the second. Arboliva goes back into the ancient Pokeball, and the Pokeball mechanism locks so that it can't be opened up again. I find this plot rather interesting. Liko and Roy learn this around the same time that Freed learns this with Liko's mother. And at first, the only reason that Liko's mother is into this episode in the first place is because she meets up with Freed while he's at the library. Those two catch up, and I'm guessing they've been related in some way, shape, or form. They're connected somehow. And Liko's mother seems to be an adventurer in and of herself, or a traveler. So now that we got a lot of background on that, there's a lot of things in this episode that I'm very split on. That doesn't necessarily mean they're bad things, but they are split. But before we get to that, I want to touch on some little details that I noticed that I thought were pretty cool. We finally get to see Ludlow in action. He has a Quagsire, and we also see the Dive Ball, which is pretty cool. Glad to see the Pokemon's playing around with multiple different Pokeballs. They haven't really done that since, I want to say, Johto with Ash's Lure Ball for Totodile and the Lure Ball for Corsola for Misty. So it's good to see that we're playing around with different types of Pokeballs. That's really good. And we also see the Quagsire comes out so that it can use Rain Dance in order to help bring the plants back to life. I'm split on this as well, too. While I do like the fact that the Rain Dance helps bring the plants to life and to sprout, I don't like that Arboliva uses her power to speed up the growing process. I like the idea that since Liko and Roy are traveling to different regions all the time, I thought it would have been fun if Liko came back to the Paldea region after helping grow those berry trees. And then when she came back, those trees are growing a little bit more as time passes. And then by the end of the series, we get this cool, large, lush-grown forest that Liko and Roy helped to build together. But instead, unfortunately, we get everything sped up right at once. And I didn't really care for that because, again, like I said, I would like to see the growth of those plants from start to finish. It would have been a very cool, this is you guys' first impact as the Rising Voltaclers. You help restore this forest. This is the first step. We see these sproutlings are just like you two. They're reminiscent. You all started your journeys, and then by the time you guys end your journeys, or at least the series is over, you can come back to the very forest that you guys helped grow. It's symbolic. But they speed up all of that thanks to Arboliva having the power to basically put trees on steroids and grow instantly. So, not so much connected to that as I wanted to be. But, hey, I do like the effort of them at least going through and restoring an entire forest. As far as the other splits go, there's two other splits. We'll tackle Liko mother first since it's something that I can sort of gel with, but there's some things I don't like. The one side I do like of Liko mother. Freed asks Liko mother, hey, would you like to go see your daughter first? And she basically declines the offer. The reason being is because she knows her daughter well enough to know that her daughter's probably just going to ask her questions and try too hard to cling onto the idea that if my mother's here, I can just question her about this whole mystery and she'll help me discover most of it. She doesn't want to do that. She wants her daughter to figure things out on her own and grow on her own as a character. That's a really good incentive, and it's a really good show that she understands her daughter very well and will allow her daughter to grow on her own 2 feet rather than relying on her. So good job there for Liko mother. The part I'm split on, though, is that in the context of a parent, while this is a good step for helping a child grow, it's very weird that her mother doesn't at least want to see Liko off before she gets going. She could have easily just declined any questions that Liko has of her regarding this mystery around the ancient Pokemon and then just say, you'll have to figure those things out yourself, but I'm glad to see that you're doing well, sweetie. Now I gotta go. That would have been just as acceptable. Here, she doesn't even bother visiting her daughter. And this is a Liko that's been attacked by the Explorer terrorist 3 times up to this point. So I don't know, it feels weird to me from a parent perspective. I'm not a parent, but from a perspective of what I would presume a parent would be, is that she doesn't even want to see her daughter once. It's odd. Like, in my head, it does seem very odd. Again, she's doing it for character growth purposes, but it seems very befuddling that she would even do this in the first place. It almost seems like they brought Liko mother into this particular episode to talk with Free so they can get exposition out of the way in story, but they're not going to allow her to meet her daughter because that would cause a lot of rushed character development that can't take place until long after the series has gone old. Basically, Liko mother can't show up until later in the series for development purposes. And while I do applaud shows for doing that, I have no problem with shows openly just showing the fact that a character is going to meet a person from their past or closely related to them at a pivotal point in the story. Those are usually story beats that are used effectively in writing, in which the character shows up for the time being when it's necessary. It should never feel, as an audience member, that you can blatantly see the strings being pulled. In the Pokepod, I gave a prime example of that being in Dragon Ball Z. It's the part where Akira Toriyama originally wanted to make 19 and 20 the original bad guys of that arc. But then his editors told him that they didn't like 19 and 20 because they're just an old man and a goofy fatso clown. So he changed it to 17 and 18 later on. But in the story beat of that, what happens is Dr. Gero, the old man, states that he'll unleash 17 and 18, which means they're not open yet. So story-wise, it makes sense. Later, the editor says that he doesn't like 17 and 18 because they're just a bunch of punk teenagers. So instead, make Cell. That's why the editor said what he said, and Toriyama ends up making Cell the final big bad of the arc. That's why when 17 and 18 are unleashed, they end up fighting Cell later, and Cell needs to absorb the other 2 androids to justify those 2's existence. There's changes happening in the background that we as the audience aren't supposed to know about, but during the story, it never feels that way. Here, it's blatantly obvious. Liko mother is here, and she needs to dump character exposition to Freed, but she needs to have this happen simultaneously with Liko and Roy making the same discovery so that Freed knows pretty much what the kids know without the kids having to be the smarter ones. Then the mother can't really appear in the story anymore until it's pivotal, so they have to remove her. It, like, again, I'm not hating this because I do like the lore. I think the issue here is that the lore is conveniently putting characters in spots that they need to be and then conveniently removing them for the sake of, well, we don't want to rush character development, do we? The other split I have is the plot within and of itself. The goal now has become a find that Dragon Ball. There's a lot of Dragon Ball references in this review. The goal now is to find that ancient Pokeball. There's 6 of them, so they're going to have to travel all around the world in order to collect them in a Dragon Ball search style situation. Obviously, each Pokeball will be accompanied by a boss Pokemon, very similar to that of the Titan Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, the video game. So while I do like this very directness to the plot and what our characters have to do in order to get better and in order to discover more about this ancient mystery, there's a lot of things that feel very oddly placed within this plot that's suddenly opened up. I'm more or less paying attention to the ancient book that they decide to read up on this story. When they read this story, Roy states that his grandfather read him this exact same story a long time ago. And the story even includes the Black Rayquaza in it. So I find it rather odd that when Roy unleashed the Black Rayquaza in its first attempt during the Ancient Pokeball in episode 6, when Rayquaza came out of that Pokeball, at no point did Roy make a reference to the story that he was told to as a kid by his grandfather. They even sit down at the table of the grandfather's house and go, "What's up with that Black Rayquaza?" And the grandpa blatantly goes, "I don't know." He literally responds with an "I don't know," regardless of the fact that this Black Rayquaza has been mentioned in this story several times. It feels like the literary dump didn't have an exact same communication level as the current thing that happened right then and there. It's almost like both of these storylines were written on separate dates and weren't communicated with the other writers. Grandpa doesn't know about the Black Rayquaza. And granted, this is a story, a work of fiction. So it could be devoted that, oh, this just happened to be a black shiny Rayquaza, but it can't be the story's Black Shiny Rayquaza. That was just a book. That was a story tale. But I would have at least appreciated it if they were referenced. Like, oh, we saw a Black Shiny Rayquaza. I wonder why it was in that ancient Pokeball. And then Roy goes, it sounds a lot like the story Grandpa told me as a kid. And then they talk to Grandpa and he goes, but that's probably just a myth. We don't know for certain. But it is interesting to look at. But they don't even mention it. Roy and his grandpa both simultaneously act like they have no idea what connections this could possibly have at all. It's not until they refer to the story. And when Roy receives the book, he states that the story was read to him as a kid. And that is an entire narrative plot dealing with the ancient trainer and his 6 Pokemon. So it feels odd to me that that story is never brought up until this episode. Now granted, again, I like the lore behind it. I even like the story and how it goes because it shows that the ancient Pokemon trainer, much like regular trainers, have 6 Pokemon on hand. It's just that these 6 Pokemon play a pivotal role towards the advancement of the story. That's fine. And the fact that our heroes get to interact with those Pokemon, catching them and retrieving them from a time period that they don't belong to, is definitely an okay plot to go by, especially for Pokemon standards. I have no issue with that. The issue I have is the placement within the narrative's discovery. I get it. Everything here was formatted in a way to where the kids and Freed discover the plot at the exact same time so that both of them can come together and have a clear-cut objective. Towards the end of it, we learn that in order to meet up with Lico's grandmother, they're going to have to go to Galar at an old castle near Hammerlock. That's fine. All that said and done, until you stop for a minute and think about, hold up, this doesn't line up with exactly what happened last time. This isn't a thing that completely criticizes and breaks apart the entire series, but it is something that you'll definitely notice if you look more than a second, especially so if you go back and watch older episodes, then proceed to watch this episode in followed alignment. Overall, I think the plot's fine. It's just a very head-scratching, jarring thing that you'll notice if you look at the plot for more than 2 seconds. Other than that, though, I do like the idea here. I like the formatting, and I like the goal that Liko and Roy have. And actually, for the next 2 weeks, we won't have a Pokemon Horizons episode. And for me, I think that's pretty good. We needed a beat, a moment of rest, continuously moving one after another. Pokemon Horizons is definitely a series that tries its best to connect each and every last episode together, even if it's by a thin thread. But it's doing it more or less with the ideology that it's telling an overarching chronological narrative story. So I have no problem with the idea that now that we've gotten Liko and Roy's introduction arcs out of the way, as well as a few Rising Volt Tackler episodes, we can now finally move forward. But we need to take a breather first before the heroes literally head off to Galar. And I think that's perfectly fine. As far as this episode goes, I gave it a 7.5 during the Pokepod review, and I think I'm pretty much going to stick with that exact score. The only reason that I can't bring it higher is because of the things that I very much notice. But I do like the world building and the ancient story plot aspect of it, because it is digging deep into an objective that our heroes will have to eventually do, and I'm curious to see how this plot will unfold later. I hope that it's not rushed, but at the same time, I hope that it doesn't drag itself to the point where it basically feels like we're getting nowhere. Or we get a bunch of like non-related episodes until we get to our next ancient Pokemon. The best part about this is that the series is new, so every step of the way helps towards Liko and Roy's growth. They can catch a new Pokemon, the Pokemon can learn a new move, one of their Pokemon can evolve, they can discover a new place, they can end up gaining development with the other crew members, they can interact with each other. This definitely gives us oodles of potential, and I can't wait to see what we run into from the next half of Pokemon Horizons. They stopped it at episode 12, which pretty much feels like a seasonal break. It's just instead of an entire large amount of months or even a year that we have to wait for a new season, this time we just have to wait about 3 weeks. So, with that being said, there is no title for the next episode yet because they haven't made that title yet. We won't get another title probably until about a week, maybe a week and a half. So, I will see you all then, everybody. Tyrone TG3 out. Hey, you! Wake up! Double it and give it to the next person. What? No, that's not this type of video. Hey, do you like entertaining things on the internet? What? Put that away! Oh my god, I've had it up to here with this. Just roll the clip. We saw just as much as Daredevil did.
Boo, get the fuck out of here.
Nah, f*** you, that was funny. F*** you, that was funny.
You were so mad.
Oh my god!
How are you still alive?
I have no idea. Got him! Woo! Name something you find in your bedroom drawer.
The naked grandma.
What? Hey, that stuff looked funny and entertaining. You want to watch it for free? Yeah? Then check out twitch.tv/Tyrone_TG3. Where'd these letters come from? I'm scared.